It's actually similar to the inflection point that hit Microsoft in 2000. They went through an antitrust trial, which they lost. They were deemed to be, and it created a morale crisis. And young engineers who looked to go with companies that were vibrant and forward-looking and not under a cloud didn't go to Microsoft. And they lost over a decade of momentum, which they've now regained. But I think that you see it in the stock price down 36% from a high in July. You see it with people not wanting to join. You see it with the morale that Mark Zuckerberg has talked about, the morale problem that they have. And you see it with potential division between he and Sheryl Sandberg.
Do you think that potential division is real, and how do you think that manifests itself, either of you?
I mean, I think there's nuance to that, which is in any office environment, in any high-pressure environment, you're going to have top execs disagree with other, and the CEO blaming someone like a Sheryl Sandberg. Hey, you screwed that up. You need to fix it. And then maybe she fixed it, and he's like, hey, good job. Keep going. You know. So I think that is probably the closer to the nuance. What our colleagues at the New York Times reported in the Facebook situation, what's notable is that all these things with the dealing with DC and doing their own sort of maybe kind of PR misinformation, if you want to call it that, that feels very much like a Sheryl Sandberg operation. It's the type of thing that Mark Zuckerberg wouldn't necessarily have the imagination to pull off or let alone execute.
The thing, though, that piece and all of the pieces and other news that's come out over the week seem to demonstrate, or at least raise the question or red flag about what is the intent, meaning, you know, everybody, I think, thought that whether it was Mark or Sheryl or the company's intent was to do good. And then all of a sudden, this has sort of raised the red flag that there's something else going on here.
Well, you're talking about human beings. Human beings, suddenly, Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg are confronted with evidence that maybe Facebook is not impregnable. Maybe there is fake news that they haven't been able to control. Maybe their algorithms and machines don't work as they thought as defenses. And they don't want to admit it. They're just human beings, and they have trouble doing it. And then, do I want to take responsibility? This guy, Alex Stamos, who actually appeared in another forum we were at last week, was very aggressive in his criticism of Sheryl and Zuckerberg for not being proactive.
So they've portrayed themselves, I say they, meaning Mark and Sheryl have portrayed the company as being the victim of hackers, the victim of people pursuing fake news, the victim of the press. All of these things. Are they victims, or did they create this?
I think they're in charge of probably the most powerful mass communication tool we've seen in maybe ever. And that's a hard thing to have to manage. So it is their fault. They have to fix it. I think they haven't figured out the depth and the breadth of the effect that Facebook has on people and the world. And that's the imagination part. They need to be better at imagining the problems.
Okay, so you have a company, though, that is controlled by one individual in Mark Zuckerberg. What do you think the board should, but also can do, right?
I think the board has to lean on him more than they have, but there's no way they're going to replace Mark Zuckerberg. Listen, the guy is a genius, but and this goes to the heart of your question, their belief is in machines. It's not in people. And what happened? The machines didn't work, didn't block the fake news, didn't block the bots. So what did he do? In the last year, he's hired 10,000, what he calls curators, or really editors, to try and prevent that, which is an acknowledgement there are limitations to the machine. It's a human problem they're dealing with.
It's a content problem. I totally agree with Ken. I think you can't have an algorithm to solve every content issue, and they still think like that. So this appointment of like a kind of a shadow content board that Zuckerberg is talking about to sort of vet or be a third party to vet sort of content that.
But do they need to bring in another? You know, Sheryl was brought in originally. They'd say she was the adult in the room, right? Do you have to bring in somebody else? Do you have to bring in a chairman or a vice chairman or somebody else into this to create some new sense of credibility on all of this?
Listen, there's no question. She's a capable person. But, you know, Washington reported to her, public relations and marketing reported to her. She's lost some of the halo she had. She is a very capable person. And is she capable of fixing it? Yeah, but they're going to need some help. And they're going to need the pressure from a board. And by the way, pressure from advertisers, really, it's a big, important point. 97% of their income comes from advertising. Advertising want a friendly environment for their friendly products. If they don't perceive Facebook as a friendly environment, goodbye 97% revenue.
Jeff Sonnenfeld was on last week, and he brought up a lot of different ideas. The one point that I thought was a really good one was the idea that they bring back somebody like a Don Graham to the board, somebody who has experience with the company going back a long time and who has a lot of gravitas.
I think you could add people with guys like Don, a lot of gravitas, a lot of experience in media and in content. I still think Facebook has and also in Washington. He's exactly a great figure that way. I think Facebook's issue is still largely structural, right? They still rely on user-generated content to drive all the traffic.
But that's
the model. Sprinkle it with.
Do you think they're going to fundamentally change the model? Do you think they're going to create a pay business? I mean, we were talking, if you created a pay business in the United States to make up for the advertising dollars lost, you'd have to charge each individual in the U.S. alone over $100 a year. Do you think that there's an audience? And then, by the way, that's $100 if every single current user were to actually pay.
A subscription model is not an answer for the problem. Facebook is free, and they're giving something to the user, but increasingly the user is saying, you got a lot of my data. What are you doing with my data? And they're also saying there's a lot of fake news on this. And governments, both Democrats and Republicans, are saying privacy issue, too much power issue. You know, there are big issues that they're confronting.
There are ideas to sort of pay people in the data that they provide. Right. So if you are allowing your data to be used for advertising purposes, you might get a little dividend back on a quarterly basis for your supply, right?
We always talk about tech regulation, tech regulation. What do you think that actually looks like in reality in the United States? Forget about Europe for a second.
Well, I'm going to bring it to Europe for a second because they actually present a current model that the United States could look at and pick off from, right? The easiest thing is simply like all these things that come up, these notices saying, we're going to use your data, okay? Can you agree?
By the way, that's the fakest thing around. How many times have you gotten all those
and then you just went through
and you say, okay, every time.
But the other thing they could do, what Europe did do, is they say, in order for you to have my data and be able to target ads at me, I have to opt in. I have to approve it. I have to take a proactive step to approve it as a consumer. They don't want that to happen, but that's what's happening in the EU. And that's a big deal.
And, you know, this is going to continue to happen. I know fundamentally they may not change the structure of how it works, but unless they somehow severely tamp it down or figure out a way to gatekeep how these things flow through their network, people will always find a way to exploit the system no matter what. And I think the lack of, again, I'm going to go back to this, the lack of imagination, a lot of Facebook executives, that Mark Zuckerberg himself is a very earnest and idealistic person, doesn't suit the company well right now. I think that's a bigger issue.